9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3.
June 1981. 8 fighter jets are spotted in the skies over Baghdad, preparing to attack. Their target, the pride and joy of Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein.
It was one of the most important military surprises of all time.
As the jets dive at their target, stunned Iraqis stare in disbelief. The insignia on the wings is the Star of David, the symbol of the Israeli Air Force. How could Israel strike from such a great distance without detection?
It's something that has not been done before.
For more than 2 decades, the Israelis have kept the details of this unprecedented mission a closely guarded state secret.
We were not able to penetrate Israeli intelligence to gain any heads up about a potentially aggressive action against the reactor.
But now, Israel has released these classified documents, and for the first time, the mission's officers, architects, and pilots can finally tell their story.
There was a lot of firing from the ground, a lot of firing.
You see every bullet, and each one of them, that it's for you.
It was an attack that shocked the world.
I could hear the president. He said, "They did what?"
This is a story of international espionage, blackmail, and targeted assassinations. A story of one of the most daring and dangerous military operations ever attempted. The story of Israel's raid on the reactor. It is early in June 1981. Despite relative peace between Israel and the Arab world, Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin gives the green light for a top-secret military operation to proceed. Moments later, 8 F-16 jets taxi down the runway of a secret Israeli airbase in the Sinai Desert, carrying a weight that exceeds nearly twice the design specs of the aircraft. With the additional weight, the jets struggle to get airborne, but do so with precious little runway left. Finally, after years of secrecy, planning, and espionage, a mission that could determine the very fate of Israel is underway.
We had the weight of the Jewish people on our shoulders.
Not since the famed rescue at Entebbe in 1976 had Israeli intelligence undertaken such a top-secret mission. But unlike the celebrated airlift from Uganda, the Israelis believed the very survival of the Jewish state hung in the balance.
By the time Begin became prime minister, he said to his cabinet that he would not wait for a second Holocaust.
And he said, okay, you guys, if you succeed, you will save Israel for eternity.
I felt that it is the future of the state of Israel on my shoulders, yes.
Many of us were grandsons or sons of people who had been through the Holocaust. And we had been a part of a mission that was to prevent another Holocaust.
The planning of the mission, dubbed Operation Opera, had been underway for over 3 years. But right from the start, Prime Minister Begin and his staff were hoping, even praying, the raid would never have to take place.
We decided to put the kind of a red line, if you can call it a red line, saying that we'll continue to try all kinds of diplomatic efforts. Means using the military force only as a last resource.
What was this threat to the Jewish state that had the Israeli government so concerned? What enemy had the capability to strike this kind of fear in the hearts of a recognized military power? The answer laid nearly 600 miles to the east in Baghdad, Iraq, home of Saddam Hussein.
An article appeared in one of the major Baghdad newspapers saying that they would have a nuclear bomb to neutralize Israel.
In his 1987 bestseller, First Strike, Israeli author Shlomo Nachdimon describes a nightmarish scenario that in 1981 was all too real.
In the skies over Tel Aviv, an unidentified Boeing 707 is spotted approaching from the sea. All of a sudden, a huge dark object falls from underneath the airplane's wing.
Would Saddam actually have used the nuclear bomb against Israel?
Knowing Saddam Hussein, I think you have the answer.
It's very obvious that this was a man who cared very little about human life and the values that dominate Western democratic societies, and that included Israel. And they were dedicated to the destruction of Israel.
He published a statement to the Iranian people telling them that this nuclear capability is not going to be used against them. This is, we're talking about in the time of war with Iran, but against the Zionist entity.
With 3 bombs, there could be at least 500,000, maybe 600,000 Israeli casualties and the destruction of their major cities.
Whatever Saddam's intentions were, he knew Iraq did not possess the resources necessary to develop a nuclear weapon. What his country did have in abundance was oil and billions in cash to spend. So, armed with these 2 irresistible commodities, Saddam went shopping for a reactor and quickly found a supplier, French Prime Minister Jacques Chirac and the French government.
Chirac and Saddam Hussein had become quite close and had struck a contract whereby France would build this nuclear reactor. France charged him $200 million. He bought Mirage jets and 7,000 Renaults.
I was interested in that story because it was too good to be true. Too nicely, too clean, everything was too perfect.
Jean-Pierre Van Geert is a renowned French investigative reporter, famous for uncovering government secrets and scandals for over 40 years. It was Van Geert who first broke the story about the questionable dealings between France and the notorious dictator. During his investigation, he also uncovered possible evidence that Saddam had induced and enticed French officials to cooperate.
The French official got back from Iraq oil, contact in the Middle East, and they got money.
This was a purposeful, deceitful act that France adopted because they saw the tremendous quantities of oil in front of their eyes, a huge money transaction, and nothing else was important.
When the agreement was announced in 1975, the French government defended their actions. The facility would be purely a civilian reactor, used for energy purposes only. While many accepted this explanation, there were those who doubted the rationale.
Iraq has the largest oil reserves of anybody in the Middle East. So why would they need nuclear power when you're floating on a pool of oil?
Here was a nation that didn't need energy resources, didn't need nuclear energy, run by a nefarious thug, a killer. And what could one properly assume? I believe that Saddam Hussein had a nefarious purpose, and I believe the president thought so too.
Publicly, he claimed that this is for energy, for capability of scientific, peaceful goals. Privately, we know from scientists who worked, their goals were based on the assumption that 2 to 3 bombs will demolish the state of Israel, and those were the numbers that they were working on.
Everybody knew the real meaning of that construction would have been a military purpose.
Within weeks of the announced agreement, construction on the reactor began just outside of Baghdad. Saddam named the soon-to-be-built reactor after the Babylonian month of Tammuz, the very same month in which Nebuchadnezzar began his assault on the Jewish people in 586 BC. But these developments failed to raise concerns by any nation other than Israel, who regarded the situation with pessimistic trepidation.
Obviously, satellite photography was providing data on the construction of a reactor. I recall having seen it or mention of it during the transition from the Carter administration to the Reagan administration, but I don't recall that we paid any particular attention to the progress of that reactor, nor were we particularly alarmed by it.
There was no attention given to it.
Having verified the capabilities of the reactor through several international independent sources, Prime Minister Begin found himself with only one option: set into motion a plan, either through diplomacy, espionage, or military action, to stop the reactor from going hot.
He then tasked the head of the IAEA to search out several possibilities of how they could go about neutralizing this, and that's what began this whole mission.
As the 8 Israeli F-16 fighter jets clear the runway, they streak towards their target. Within minutes, they are within Jordanian airspace. As planned, the pilots then descend to an unthinkable altitude of only 100 feet above the ground.
We didn't want the enemy radar to see us, not in Saudi Arabia, not in Jordan, and not in Iraq, of course.
Then, as they approach the Gulf of Aqaba, disaster strikes.
And they flew right over this beautiful yacht, King Hussein of Jordan's yacht.